all six stripes are super striped, but not all super stripes are six striped. Does that make sense?
Hey, welcome back to the Gecko Cove Connection, the Gargoyle Gecko podcast. My name's Bobby, and in today's episode, we're interviewing David from the Gargoyle Den. We talk about things like, should you ever unpair your gargoyle geckos, and how to actually reduce gargoyle gecko aggression. We also talk about Phantom Eye, and a little bit about him starting his own YouTube channel. If that sounds interesting to you, you're in the right place. Welcome to Gecko Cove. Welcome back to the Gecko Cove Connection. Today I have the pleasure of introducing David from the Gargoyle Den. Welcome, David.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I am really excited for this conversation. There's a few people in this industry that caught my eye right away, and you've got some amazing geckos. So I'm really excited to kind of pick your brain, see how you kind of came to be as the Gargoyle Den, and learn a little bit from you. So I think the audience is going to have a lot of fun too. So thank you again so much for coming on. So how did you get into reptiles? What's your story like, and how did we get to the point where you got your first gargoyle?
All right. Well, growing up, as a little kid, I lived in Indiana, and my mom was pretty strict on pets. There was no pets in the house pretty much. So we had dogs and rabbits and stuff outside, and we had like a building set up for them and stuff. But we eventually got fish, and my dad was breeding fish. He bred angelfish and mollies, and he never made any money, but
No, you'd never do with fish.
Yeah. So I had set up a little aquarium in my room, and I had several different types of fish. At one point, I had a little eel. I have no idea what kind of eel it was. It was a little tiny, skinny thing. I put it in there, and I seen it for like a few weeks, and then it just disappeared, and I thought it had died or something. But it was like maybe like 6 months later, we were cleaning it, and he was still in there. And that's the only thing I remember about the eel. And then I had put some little aquarium frogs in there. I have no idea what kind they were. And then eventually,
Those little like fully aquatic frogs.
Yeah, they just kind of like float around at the top. And then I eventually talked my parents into letting me get a fire belly toad, and I had one of those. And I
Nice.
had that probably about a year until we moved to Florida. When we moved to Florida, I got rid of it because it was a big move. Um, then once we got down to Florida, I got into birds. I had a lovebird, and I had the lovebird trained to do all kinds of tricks.
Okay.
I was like probably 12 or 13 when I got that bird, and I had it for like 2 years, and it would sit on my shoulder. I had it trained that like if sitting on my shoulder and I'd be at a computer playing games or something, and a bird you can tell like when it's gonna go to the restroom, it'll kind of start scooting back and wiggling. I'd take it off and put it on the trash can,
Oh, that's
and
interesting.
I trained it. I put it on the trash can, I kind of bump its tail up, and it would go in the trash can. So I had this bird potty trained. I'd ride around town with the bird on my shoulder on my scooter or my bike, and it would just chill out there.
That is so
But
cool.
then,
Birds are the one thing that I've never gotten into, so
yeah,
that's
yeah.
awesome.
So my friends started calling me Birdman, so I was the Birdman. And unfortunately, that bird got ate by a cat.
Oh no.
Um, my dad was working real late and left the back door open, and the cat got in and got in the cage, and there's nothing
Bye
left but
bye, Tweety
feathers.
Bird. Oh no.
So I
That could
had
be a little
several birds
traumatizing.
after that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I got several birds after that, but it wasn't the same. And I also used to catch a lot of snakes here in Florida, like black racers, a lot of corn snakes and stuff. And
Mhm.
at one point I had like probably 6 or 7 of them, and I think most of those were out in the shed. I had a shed set up there was a spot in the corner of the shed. I had them set up, and then I had snuck one in my room, and I kept it in a shoebox in my closet. And eventually my mom found out.
This sounds like an escape story.
It never got out, but I also had an aquarium in there, and I had set it up with some frogs, some green frogs and stuff, just stuff I caught. But as a teenager, I never even knew that the reptile shows. I would go to, like Petco, PetSmart, places like that, and look at the stuff, but I don't remember them ever having new cow stuff. Back in the early 2000s, I don't remember any. It's mostly just bearded dragons, chameleons.
No.
So I never thought about buying any.
Yeah, more.
Like most of the ones I would catch in and keep them for a few weeks and then let them go. So I never thought about keeping something as a pet, a reptile. And then my senior year of high school, I had a friend who lived at a college dorm nearby, and he was pretty big into reptiles, and he knew that I used to catch a bunch of wild snakes and stuff, so he had caught a coral snake and had the coral snake in his dorm room in a Mountain Dew bottle. In a Mountain Dew bottle.
That's
the
ballsy.
Big, the 2-liter Mountain Dew bottle. So I would.
Yeah. Was that the new Mountain Dew challenge? You gotta drink out of it before it bites you.
Anyway, so I would help him catch palmetto bugs and little anoles and stuff to feed to this coral snake. And eventually I don't know how he learned about dart frogs, but he started talking to me about dart frogs. And I was about to grad from high school, and he told me, he says, oh, I'm looking at dart frogs, but the ones I'm getting are kind of expensive. He's like, would you want to split 50-50 with me, and I'll do all the work, and then we'll split profit. Well, I was about to go to college, and I turned him down. So I didn't do that, but I always remembered that because I thought.
And he turned into Josh's frogs.
No, but
No.
I always remembered that. So then I went off to college, didn't keep any animals in college. I got married, I had a bird, and my wife didn't like the bird. She doesn't like things that fly. She has like a phobia of things that fly, so that kind of ended the bird thing. And we've been married like a year. We were expecting our son, and I started thinking about the frogs again, and I contacted that friend about the frogs, and he connected me with Tinkman Herps. I don't know if you ever heard of them. They do dart frogs. Idris Brown, maybe?
No.
First name Idris. Anyway, I got 4 frogs from him, and I kept them for a few years. But I got them as babies, unsexed. I assumed they were possibly 4 females because I never got any calling or eggs or anything. So after like 3 months of having those, I was wanting to get more dart frogs. So I started going to reptile shows. And that's when I went to the reptile shows. They didn't have dart frogs at the reptile shows that I was going to. Like in West Palm, Florida at that time, there was no dart frogs. And I think I went to the Fort Lauderdale one and a few others. But then I started looking at some of the other stuff. This would have been.
And what year is this?
Let's see, probably like 2015, 14, 15, something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
So at that
Good
point,
time to get
I
in.
started looking at some of the geckos, and I was looking at the gargoyle geckos. A guy down here, Josh Barger from Aquatic and Exotic, he introduced me to gargoyle geckos because he had quite a few. And I got a baby from him at the show and down at West Palm. And actually, I had been on the fence about getting one, but then I walked by Tiki Gecko's booth. I think I'm not sure how long he had been vending. I don't think he was like real
Mm-hmm.
big yet, but I went by his booth and he let me hold a crested gecko. And when I held the crested gecko, I was like, this is really cool to actually hold it, but like I want the gargoyle gecko. So I got the gargoyle gecko from Josh. But it was that holding the reptile in my
Yeah.
hand that sold me on the gecko. And I think that's important if you're vending at a show. Keep some animals that are super tame
Mm-hmm.
that you can put in somebody's hand. Because it's like when it gets in the hand, that's the selling point there. So at least for me.
I agree. I think that. Oh, absolutely. I think one thing that's overlooked, I know a lot of people, germs or potential
Right.
mites or things like that. People get a little bit freaked out at shows. I get that. That's very valid. But I work in education, and I actually just did a show for a group of kids where I brought in my gargoyle geckos. I did get the
Right.
more tame ones, right? But most of my gargoyles are pretty tame, which is one thing I love about the gargoyles. And just to see their faces, even some that were a little bit more freaked out, right, never held a reptile in their life, um, holding a reptile for the first time can be a scary experience if you didn't, if you're not used to it, right? The first time I held a gecko, I'm like, okay, what am I doing?
Right. Right.
I was like a stiff board, right? And now it's second nature to me. Even the first time I held a snake, I'll be honest with you, I had an absolute fear of snakes. But the first time you hold an adult chill ball python or whatever it may be, you're like, oh,
Right.
this isn't so bad, right? It's like if you never grew up with dogs and all of a sudden you start petting a dog. That positive reinforcement is fantastic. So yeah, great selling technique, but I think it also, we've got to bridge that gap with
Right.
a lot of
And
people's fears. So
it
great
it
point.
really is all about the animals, and that's just
Hmm.
I don't know, like just getting it in your hand, like even now, like that's the best part, getting them out and holding them, looking at them. And at this point, I have a lot
Yep.
of them, and that's kind of one thing that I kind of regret as far as like keep getting more is that I don't get to hold the individual ones as much anymore, especially since my family is demanding more time now. Right.
Yeah, you can't spend 20 minutes with each gecko. No, I definitely get that. And like we talked about earlier, in one of the other podcasts, I won't get into this. I kept fish too. I've had a lot of pets. You've probably had even more pets than I've had,
Oh yeah.
which is an accomplishment. So congratulations on that. And but what's nice about these geckos, whether it's crested geckos, gargoyles, chewies, any of the new cow species, bearded dragons, leopard geckos, all the really popular pets. The common denominator, which you pointed out, is being able to hold on to them, handle them, interact with them in a very
Right.
unique way. Now, they don't love being pet on like a dog or a cat. We're not going to pretend that, but they tolerate it and they don't have a negative effect, as long as you're doing it correctly. Where otherwise, fish, by other geckos. I mean, the day geckos
Right.
are stunning. Some of the tokays, everybody wants to handle the tokay. Nobody just wants to leave it, unless it's that mean. And so, there's I wouldn't say prettier things, but on par, if not slightly prettier than gargoyles and crested geckos.
Right.
But overall, which one's more popular? The ones you can handle. So yeah. So you went and you saw that gargoyle. You picked it up. Do you remember what kind it was? Was it a blotch, a stripe? Did it have any color to it? 2015.
Yeah,
Did you
it
spend
was a
two thousand
blotch.
dollars?
No, it was a blotch. I paid 125 for it, and he didn't have very many. It was a one for 125, a blotch, or a stripe for 150, and I went with the
Okay.
blotch. And then I had kept that one for a while, and um, then I was looking. I found the Facebook pages for gargoyle geckos, and I was looking at different gargoyles, and at that point you could post stuff for sale. You could post geckos for sale on Facebook. And
Yep.
so I got two geckos from a guy down, I think in Fort Lauderdale, and he bought these from a company called Gourmet Rodent. They were like they sold like rodent feeders, but then they also, I guess, did wholesale breeding. And I think at that point
Okay.
they were like closing down, and the guy had picked them up, and then he flipped them, and I got them from him. Uh,
Yeah, nice.
so I bought my first female Valenice, uh, which just before that we got on the call, I was holding that one. So yeah, she was probably about
Yeah.
8 years old when I got her, and that was almost 8 years ago. So she's about 16 years old. And
And she looks
yeah,
great. She's
yeah.
nice and big.
And then I also bought a juvenile male, but he was probably only like 20 grams, orange stripe with a light base.
Okay.
And so I had to grow him out. So at that point, I had a baby, the female, and the young male. Um, but I couldn't find. I was looking all over the place. I could not find adult male that I could breed. And I didn't have plans to do this. Like I was basically just doing it as a hobby. Like like, oh, I got these now. I want to breed them. So yeah.
Yep.
So I
Exactly.
actually started talking to Kelly from Eclipse Exotics, and she helped me out a lot because I was learning everything new. And she explained to me a lot of care and the diet and the simple, straightforward breeding setups and stuff. And I ended up picking up a few more females. I tried doing a breeding loan with her with one of her males, but we never got any babies. So then I ended up buying a male from her, and that male is Rojo, and he's actually in this right here.
Okay.
And he was produced by Sharon Woody. I don't know. Have you heard of Sharon Woody?
No.
Okay.
I'm still brand new, so I'm hearing names
All
that,
right.
that I probably should know.
Sharon Woody. You
So
probably
tell me
won't.
about her. Who is
You
she?
probably won't hear a lot about her nowadays. She sold off a lot of her collection like 2 years ago, and even before that, she mostly
Okay.
sold everything private sale. But she's been breeding them since early 2000s. She got, I
Okay.
think a lot of her animals came from Alan Rapace when he was selling off his collection to, uh, make his new diet, and also a few of the other original
Yep.
breeders. So her stock was a lot of the original stock, and so I learned a lot from Sharon. I ended up getting in contact with her. I got some more animals from Sharon. Um, and there's actually a lot of breeders, a lot of your big name breeders, they have stock that comes from Sharon Woody.
Interesting. Okay.
So,
A lot of Florida
yeah.
breeders, probably.
She's actually in Texas.
Oh, okay. So she could be,
So,
all over then.
yeah.
Very
Um,
cool.
so I learned a lot from Sharon as far as my breeding strategies and stuff. A lot of my breeding strategies I've learned from Sharon. Um, so anyway, that's like
Yeah. So, okay, you
introduction
learned
of
that
how I
from
got
her.
into it.
Yeah. Okay. So you learned a lot from her, and you probably sourced it from Facebook, the group, and a few other sources. Um, let's talk real quick about just because we're at the end of what I would consider my breeding season, my very first breeding season. I think my
Yeah.
girls are pretty much done. Um, but do you keep your geckos in pairs? Do you keep them 1-to-1? Do you do groups? What do you do?
Yes.
Yes to everything. All right, I
Yes.
like that.
So we
All
can
right,
talk
so what's
about
your
that.
strategy?
Um,
Yeah.
I've tried a lot of different strategies. At first, I was doing just all one-on-one pairs. My first season, I got, what was it, 3 or 4 females, and then I eventually got that male. And that was like towards the end of the season, so I was taking him and rotating him between the enclosures of the females, and I was getting some
Mm-hmm.
eggs, but every time I would take him out from one female and put him in with another one, and then the other female would quit laying fertile eggs. And I've heard people say like, "Oh yeah, you can do that and they keep laying," but I've never had that happen. Not with any of the New Caledonian species. I've kept crested, Chihuahua, Gargs, you know, eh, yeah,
Okay.
I never had them hold sperm.
If you don't have a boy there, they're not laying fertile eggs for you. Okay, well that's interesting because I was starting to get the impression doing all these interviews that gargoyles may need males more often. Maybe they don't return or retain sperm. And again, I'm just speculating here. I don't really know. Trying to figure this out like everybody else. But everything I hear about crested geckos is that it's a lot easier. You pair them once, they retain sperm for a ridiculous amount of time. Maybe you repair them halfway through, but usually you're good to go. You're saying you didn't even have luck
No,
doing
I've
that with the
bought
crested
crested
geckos.
geckos, adult females, like, oh, she's laying fertile eggs, she's a proven breeder. You buy it expecting you're going to get a few more clutches out. You may get one, and then after that, nothing. So I don't know. It may be work for other people, but for me,
Nothing.
it has
Okay.
not worked. So I started doing pairs at the beginning and
All
rotating the
right.
male. And things that I observed during that time was that it was during the introduction of putting the two together that there's conflict. There's a establishment of dominance, and
Mm-hmm.
so you got to really watch them during those times. But I did not like rotating them because it's like you never know when you're gonna open it to an injured gecko, and I ended up with a lot of nipped off tails and chewed up heads, and I decided that that was not what I wanted to do.
Sure.
So,
Now, was that just with
uh,
your gargoyles or was that with other species?
well, I think it more specifically with gargoyles, but typically if there is conflict, it's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times at the beginning. Of course, there can always be something that happens, especially with leeches. You hear it more that you can have a pair together for a long time, and then all of a sudden one day they decide they don't like each other.
Yeah.
And actually, that
Because
was
they're,
my experience. That was my experience with my first lychee pair. I bought a lychee just like, oh, I'll get a lychee as a pet, and then it grew up, and I was like,
mm-hmm.
oh, I better get her a male. Oh, I better put
Right.
them together.
We,
So I put them together,
uh,
and they never fought at the beginning. The first season, like I just left them together, and I got every 30, actually 25 to 30 days, she would lay a clutch of 2 eggs for
wow.
uh, until I had what was it, 16 clutches in a row over like a year and a half.
Holy cow.
Yeah, and this was something like at that time my gargoyle six stripe projects were going terrible. I throw these two leeches together, bam, 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 baby, baby, baby. I'm like, what?
I'm in the wrong business here, man.
Yeah. So, but I had them together for 4 years, and then after 4 years, one day, uh, they got in a fight, and she got torn up pretty bad, and then I separated them, and I kept them apart for maybe like 8 months, and then I put them back together, and they're still together now, and there's no more fights since then. But uh, that's kind of like with leeches, like you just got to keep an eye on them because you never know when those guys are gonna switch. But more specifically, switch. But with gargoyles, more specifically, going back to that, um, whenever there's introduction, that's when you have conflicts. In my experience, most of the time it's at that time. So as long as my pairs are getting along, I keep them together all the time. I
Okay.
don't separate them unless I'm switching something up. And at that time, if there's like a pair and I'm going to switch them up, I separate them and I keep them separate for a few months to so that they can you know,
Cool down.
readjust before pairing
Yep.
them up again. Yeah, and I also cool everything in the winter to give them kind of like a slower period, and that's usually when I would make any changes and
Okay.
introductions. When they're you know cooled off and moving slower.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, because I've never, again, I'm way smaller than you. I've only been doing this for, a year as far as pairing them together. I've had zero aggression other than I will say I was an idiot. So if you just bought gargoyle geckos, do not put two females together if they're not adults. And I wouldn't even recommend putting two females unless you're planning to breed with a trio. But I put them in the next night. One of them had the other one's tail in his mouth. So
yep,
luckily that's all it was. But if you think you're going to save space and money by putting females in together when they're 30 grams, don't do it. I'm warning you right now, it's a bad idea.
yeah, actually,
So,
with the female that's in here, she is mean, especially with other females. And I had her
okay.
in I had her in with I think two other females and a male. I put them together and I kept finding females. I was like, man, this male is normally like really gentle. Like he never hurts females. But I took him out and the other females kept getting hurt. And one day I saw her in there. She was just tearing into one of the females. So yeah, I
Yeah.
took her out. She's never been in, with any other female since then. And I have a really big male I put with her. And she's small. She at most is probably 48 grams, and it fluctuates down to like between 44 and
Okay.
48 grams. And the male I have her with is like 65 grams. And even then, she likes to chase him around some. So,
Dude, size means nothing. Absolutely nothing.
yeah,
I'm half Italian. Some of the women in my family are 5 foot nothing, and they rule the roost. Let's be honest here. So, you know, I, you know, but yeah. So size, it's all about attitude, whether it's humans or whether it's geckos, for sure.
right,
So yeah, they all have different personalities, and some people just get lucky and don't get any ones with a wicked personality. And every so often, if we buy enough geckos, we're gonna find one, right?
right.
So that's really cool. Okay, so you keep them in together as much as possible. I think that's interesting. You're the first person saying that it's the initial pairing that's the danger zone. I've heard the thing with the leeches where it could happen at any point. I wondered if that was the same thing with gargoyles.
Uh,
So I really like that point.
well, I mean, I'm just speaking from my own experience. Other people may do the exact same thing I'm
Yeah,
doing
no.
and get completely different results. But, you know,
Hey, I think that's a disclaimer on every one of these
yeah,
episodes. They're all everybody who's given advice. This is a basically an experiment of one, and you've got so many data points. The more geckos you have, the more data points you have. I but I think that's the fun of learning. Otherwise, this would be boring if everybody did the same
right.
thing every single time. I couldn't ask any more questions. I'd interview one person, we'd be done, right? So and it's cool. I so okay. You pair them up, and then you said that you will do trios. Do you ever do more than trios, and why do you do trios?
Yeah, I do groups, and actually, I got that from talking to Kelly, who is with Paul now
Hmm.
from Rack House, and that's what Paul does is he does groups, and so I was asking Kelly about like
Yep.
why, and um, it's I and I started trying it out, and I think actually I have less injuries with the groups because like serious less serious injuries because if there's one animal in there that's a bully,
Sure.
it's not just picking on the same animal all the time and just, picking on it till it kills it. Uh,
Okay.
but you still got to watch the groups, especially when you first put them together. You watch them super, super close, see if there's any animal that's being a bully, being really aggressive. But once they settle in, a group can be super, super stable. So I have groups and pairs that I've
Interesting.
kept together
Okay.
years. And once I establish them and they're together, and then I tend to not have a lot of bad injuries. Of course, you may get little, you know, like the male may mate with the female and chew up her neck a tiny bit, or you may get a small nip on the tail. It's fairly common
Yeah.
that they'll nip the tip of the tail, and I kind of watch it and clean it. I have a whole process I use for tail nips and treating them, but um, yeah, I find great
Okay.
success in both groups and pairs. And
Okay. So you clean. I don't want to overlook that. So you clean some of their little scuffs and flesh wounds. So
yeah,
that's interesting. So I know that they heal rather quickly, from what I can tell, when they
right.
do have little love bites, as I call them. I But what do you use? I'm interested.
Oh yeah. So it really mostly it depends on the wound and how severe and where it's at. There's always times that
Sure.
there's some things you can't treat yourself that you should take to a vet. And if you are new and you
Hmm.
don't know anything, take it to a vet. But you know,
Yes.
I've been working with them for years, and I learned from people who've been working with them for years, and I've learned from a lot of the medical things I learned from Kelly, who was a vet assistant, so she knows a lot of that stuff. So,
Awesome.
um,
So know what you're doing.
right. So if it's like a tail nip, and you can see the flesh and maybe a little pus coming out of it, um, I will start with washing it with saline wash. There's saline wound wash
Okay.
that you can pick up at CVS or wherever, and there's one that comes in a spray bottle, and I like to use a spray bottle because it will kind of the pressure from it will wash out the wound, and then you can put some like
Hmm.
neosporin on it, and then that helps keep it from getting infected.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, yeah, and definitely, yeah, the spray is going to help kind of clean it out. Yeah, obviously, if they've got a giant hole in their head, take them to a vet. But little things. Also, one thing, not that you're going to learn everything from a vet, but if you take an animal to a vet and it's something like just, kind of cleaning them up slightly, it's not too bad. After spending $1,000 or a few $100, there's
But
some well-earned knowledge.
right, but if you're coming into it as a new person, you need to be willing to pay for a vet visit. If you're thinking about breeding, put some money aside and say, okay, if something goes bad, I have
Yes.
this money if I need to go to the vet. So,
Not when, but or not if, but when, right? Because
right,
anytime you're dealing with animals, kids, it doesn't matter, right? Something is going to happen where we need medical care. Hopefully nothing too severe, but that's great advice. So, okay, I want to pivot here for a second
yep.
because one thing that caught my eye even more than your geckos, not to overshadow your geckos, I I love your logo. You've got a few different variations.
Oh,
I think it's one of the coolest logos in the game right now. So, did you design it? Did you have somebody design it? Where did you come up with even the name, the Gargoyle Den? I think that's a cool name. I like Gecko Cove for different reasons, but to me, your name's cooler. I'll be honest with you.
hey,
Your name's cooler.
um, how did I come up with the Gargoyle Den? Um,
Yeah.
I think it was actually on the way to the vet, if I remember right.
Great timing for that question then.
Yeah. Um, but it's been so long, like I don't actually clearly remember. I do remember I was on
Fair enough.
95 and I was driving south and just going through different names, and it just came to me, and I was like, oh, that flows good, like the Gargoyle Den. Yeah, that's cool.
Hmm.
And and I didn't even
Did you ask your wife like 1,000 different names and she gets sick of it and goes, "Yeah, that's the one. Stop
no, I
asking me."
don't think so. But
Okay, you're smarter than I am then.
anyway, like that's the name I came up with. I mean, that would have been probably 7 years ago now. and I
Okay.
never had a logo for the longest time. I just had a picture like on my Facebook page. It had like a Rojo, a close up of his eye with his mouth open, and this had like a text across the bottom. It's actually the same font here, but just red, and it said the Gargoyle Den.
Okay.
But then I was working on like I wanted a logo, and it took me a long time to come up with what I wanted. And I was trying to like express kind of how it makes me feel when I hold a gecko. And so I don't
Mm-hmm.
know, maybe you can put up the logo where everybody can see it, but you know, okay.
Yeah, I'll put it up right
Yeah.
here.
So I came up with this idea, and it's actually all the artwork's done by Noah Bounds, and he did artwork for me.
Okay.
And at first, I was kind of nervous that, like, I'm thinking of this idea. Can Noah actually do this? Because like his art that I was seeing was not quite the style I wanted. But I was like, okay, well, I'll go
Okay.
with it. I'll trust him. And when I gave him the idea, he's like, oh man, I really been wanting to try. There's like some different ideas that he's been wanting to try. So like the gecko
Mm-hmm.
that's in the gargoyle's hand, it's like I took there's a picture I found online. It's a gargoyle holding like an orb, like a glowing orb, and like looking into it like a fortune ball or something. Well, I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, I want the gargoyle to be the
Yep.
centerpiece. So I think like, when I hold that gecko, I'm like, it's late at night, it's dim in the room. I'm like holding it like, wow, this thing is so cool. And it's like with its little horns and kind of evil looking. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, okay, so that's like me holding the gecko, and then like the light's glowing from it because it's the center. It's actually supposed to be the centerpiece, but it's like down in the corner. Everything's focused down there to that gecko. Um, and then we put
Yep.
the gargoyle has the gecko face. So it's
Which I love. I think
yeah,
that it actually looks like a stone gargoyle holding a gargoyle to me. That's what I see.
yes,
And now that you're telling me the story, which I want to hear the rest of, but to me, when you're telling me that future globe, right? I'm thinking as a breeder now, and I'm getting a little bit probably too deep and reading into it, probably way too much. But it's like that's the future. Your gecko, you're looking at seeing what could you create in the future with that gecko. I don't know. That's what I just
yeah,
thought of right
yeah.
now. You're like, yeah, go with it.
I don't know. It's just like all of the feelings that,
So,
of course, those creative feelings, the
dude, I
just
think you nailed
and
it. Obviously, I like it. I
yeah,
think it's great. When I thought of, a gargoyle gecko, to me, the name's cool. I think, it's a little bit of a stretch looking at the gargoyles in Notre Dame or on all the cathedrals. To me, those are kind of evil spirit looking, and they have a menacing look, but it's more dragonish to me, gargoyles in real life.
yeah,
Um, and so I always thought having a logo where you morph the look of a gargoyle's face into the stone. Like one of the names I thought of was tower geckos, right? I won't go into the reason why, but I thought that would have been cool where they're perched on a tower. And your logo, when I saw that, I'm like, that right there is the coolest thing. That's what I was thinking of. So way to go on that one.
thanks.
And your artist nailed it, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, he did an excellent job.
So
I was like, this is perfect. I wouldn't change anything about it. And since then, I've come up with some other ideas for art pieces, but I just haven't like I have all these ideas, but I'm not good at drawing. So eventually, I want to
sure.
commission some more pieces. But uh, I guess my artwork is
It's
breeding the
really cool.
geckos. So,
It is. I tell people that all the time that it's an art form. It's not as easy as just putting two things together or putting it straight on paper, but you're playing the odds, right? It's almost like a lottery with also having an artistic eye. You have to be able to look into the future and sort of see it before it exists. At least if you're really going to do this the right way, in my opinion, you could just try to recreate what's out there, which that's a strategy too. Nothing wrong with that. But if you can envision something that doesn't even exist, that's the gecko that's going to be the next craze. That's the one that's
Right.
going to, set you apart. And I think that's a cool thing. Very cool. Yeah, I mean, my logo is a lot simpler. I wanted something that would just
Right.
be easy to replicate. I had probably 3 or 4 renditions. If you go back on my page, you can see all the old ones. This is the one where I'm like, all right, I'm starting this YouTube channel and this podcast. What
Yeah.
will look good in that little circle? So I didn't want it to be too busy. I did it all myself and had some fun with it, but I think I'm somewhat creative. It's
Well,
not a
I
masterpiece like
have
yours
a
for sure,
degree in
but
business,
it's
and
cool.
according to marketing, my logo is not really good for
Yeah.
marketing because people are like, what is that? You want something that they can look at it.
Yes.
Like if you're driving down a road and you look at a sign, you look away, and then that second you look, then your mind processes, oh, what did I see? And then it
Mm-hmm.
remembers it. And that's what you want as far as like a business logo.
Yep.
But I was like, well, I'll sacrifice and do what I'm not supposed to,
Right.
and I did what I have now. So
I think it's cool. Well, I think that I've read that. To a degree, the simpleness of mine sort of mimics that a little bit. But I will say, look at 90% of all the really awesome, what you think is awesome when you're going on Morph Market, all the logos, they're way
right,
more
right,
intricate. They're really stylized. We're not Nike, we're not, McDonald's. We don't need that kind of instant brand recognition. Our geckos, in my opinion,
right,
are that instant brand recognition. I can rattle off a few different breeders where I'm like, you look at that, and it's like, ooh, okay, at that quality, it has to be one of
right.
these people. So I think that's the cool thing. Um, all right, speaking of quality, you have some absolute amazing six stripes. And here's the thing, I'm a little bit excited. I don't know if you saw me, I posted on Instagram this week that I think that I actually hatched out my very first six stripe with a pair that only laid one
Yeah,
egg all season. And so I am just over the moon. I feel like I won the lottery. It's Christmas. You
right.
fill in the blank with the analogy. Um, when did you start producing such high-end geckos, and what was it like the very first time you hatched out your first ultra blotch or six stripe?
Yeah,
Can you tell me that story?
well, kind of the stuff I started out with at the time was pretty nice, but of course, it was a good starting point to build
Mm-hmm.
from there on. Um, and I wanted to produce six stripes and high res, not even just six stripes, but high res, high color,
Yep.
and um, I had the worst luck the first few years. Um, Even like my regular projects, like I said, like that for a while they didn't when the first half of that first season, like I didn't get anything. I eventually bought the male and kept it myself with the females, and I got some eggs. And I think I'm not sure how much you want to talk about money, but I think the first year I
Yeah,
spent like
bring up money. I love it.
I think it was like 1,200 I spent on between a male and I think it was three females. And that first year, I only produced a few babies, but at that time, Facebook they would sell. Like you would just post something, it would sell so fast
Mm-hmm.
because there wasn't a lot of people breeding them. So, I mean, like I think my first few babies I was
So you made your
selling,
money back pretty
yeah, I
quick.
was selling for like 250, 350, and if you look back, like they were, I mean, at that time they were all right, but like now I'd be like, like they're not that nice, really. But I
Yeah,
made I made my money
you're getting
back that
better.
first year, and then I just used that money to buy more breeders, and then I just uh, basically what I have now, I've grown from that initial like 1,200, and um,
Okay.
so
And how many geckos are you at right now? How many
I
gargoyles
have no
specifically?
idea.
If you want to
I
ballpark
don't
it,
know.
ballpark it. How many
Pairs,
breeding pairs or groups?
40, 50 maybe. I don't know.
This is what I love. Okay, I got to say this. I love when I talk to non-gecko people, and everybody listening to this who owns geckos can hopefully relate to this. You tell them you have more than two geckos, and they're like, "What is
Yeah,
wrong with you? That is so many." I could tell them I have 20 right now, right? I have
yeah.
23 now that I just hatched three in the last 2 days, and they're like, "Oh my God, your wife's an absolute saint to put up with you like that." A, she is, not denying that, but 20 geckos is nothing. Absolutely, especially with most of them being babies and grow outs. I'm like, you've got what you
I
said,
don't know probably,
40 something
but
pairs?
I don't, it's
Right. You lost count. And,
it's probably between
it's
two and
just
three
funny to
hundred.
me.
Yeah,
People,
I probably have
your
between two or
expectations
three
change.
hundred total with everything. But going
Yeah, people
going
don't
back
believe me
to
when
your
I tell them
question
that.
about producing six stripes, yeah, I had a ton, basically
Yeah.
several years of really bad luck. I had one female, my first female six stripe I got from um, Redline Geckos from Marcos. You
Oh,
familiar
cool.
with
Yeah.
him? Yeah.
Yeah, we just he just liked my Instagram page, and so I noticed
Yeah.
that right away. So, hi,
Yeah.
how are you doing, buddy?
I,
If you're watching.
I called him on the, we talked on the phone today, and we were talking about the podcast. So, um, yeah, I got the first six stripe female from him, and it took me about 3 years to get it to breeding size, and then I
Hmm.
paired it up and didn't get any babies, and paired it with another male, didn't get any babies, and still to this day, she's my only female I think that I've never gotten eggs from. She will
Oh no.
every month she'll go in there and dig and lay down there in the bottom and no eggs.
Hmm.
So that was like my
That's
that was
disappointing.
one thing. And then I bought two really high end babies the day they hatched. I saw the person post the pictures and I was like, I'll buy it. You just tell me how much and I'll buy it. And
Yep.
I bought one that way.
Blank
I
check.
bought that one, and then like a few months later, I bought another one. Well, I grew those out, and it's like the things that I
Hmm.
wanted the most to work grew the slowest, and so I had to
Yep.
grow that male out. The oldest one, it was about 3 years old when I finally paired them. I paired them to one female, and I had them together for a while, and she wasn't producing fertile eggs. I was like, well, I'll try them with another female. Put them with another female, and I come in. It was late at night. I come in to check on him, and he's just laying there, like with his head crooked, all sprawled out. And I picked him up, and he just like had a seizure, and he died.
Oh
So
man, you're not having
yeah,
good luck at all. I'm surprised you're
so
still in the
I mean, like,
game.
that was so hard. And I've kept
Yeah.
now probably thousands of geckos over the years, and I would say deaths are very minimal. Like, and to lose him is so
Yeah.
unexpectedly, that was so tough. And that's when I was like, that's when around when I had put peaches together, like I said, and here she is pumping out eggs, and I have the
Hmm.
female six stripe that won't lay eggs. I have the male that died, and so I started. Well, I've been talking with Sharon Woody. I mentioned Sharon, And one thing I've learned from her is
Yeah.
because she was working when she got her original stock, a lot of it was very uh, plain, And one of her strategies that I learned from her
Mm-hmm.
was that you put two together, and if you're not impressed with what they're producing, switch it up. You're not impressed, switch it up. And these original breeders, by doing that, they could produce fire stuff out of like the most plain looking geckos. And so that's kind of what my strategy has been
Interesting.
is
Yeah.
switching things up when it's not going, well as far as like the quality of the babies, or even if they're not breeding, if you're not getting fertile eggs. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so
So give me some hope. Tell me the story where you actually get what you want.
where I get
Otherwise, you got to switch your name from
yep,
Gargoyle Den to Lychee Den.
right. So that's where I was going with that. So hope, yeah. So I was learning this, like, trying switching things up, trying things, and
Mm-hmm.
also here's the other thing I've learned is, and it may not be what the mainstream is pushing. A lot of people say, you know, buy the most expensive, most high expression animals and breed those together, and that's what you need to do. And there is truth to
Yeah.
that, but it's not the only road. And that's the most
No.
expensive way to get there. But what I did is I started reaching out to
Yep.
breeders and a lot of them, they don't want to sell those really nice ones. So I contacted them like, hey, what do you have available? Oh, I got this, maybe it was out of my budget or not for sale. Well, I would say, well, do you have any siblings to that? Or something related to it? So I started picking up things that have six stripe lineage, but are like low expression, and then growing those
Sure.
out. And my first six stripe male, he's a male. Where did I put him? I think he's right here, down here. Uh,
Okay.
he's now 3 years old. I think 3 years old, and I produce him out of this female that I told you about that's super mean. She is a black and
Mm-hmm.
white stripe, like just black and white stripe. But the lats on that,
Okay.
like it's like the well-defined white lateral. Like it, if you could take all the white off and replace it with red, she would be a red six stripe. But she's like a white and black six stripe, right? But both her parents are
Yeah.
all six stripe lineage. Both of her parents are six stripes, and that's from I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but Amicus Draco over in Europe. Um, so it's from one
Okay.
of their red groups,
Oh yeah, I got some fire
and it
stuff.
just came out black and white. And when I bought it, she was like, "Oh, I think it will develop some red because like all the babies have turned red." Well, I got it and it didn't, but I was not disappointed. I was like, "Well, I know what the genetic is." So I bred her to the all my other males were paired, and I was waiting on the younger brother of the six stripe that passed away. I was waiting on that one to get big enough. I was like, well, I need a pair to something this season because I had bought her as a baby also and grown her up. So I put her with a male I've got Pangea, and he's just
Mm-hmm.
a regular red stripe, but he's decent. And that first clutch I got from her was a
Yeah.
was a one baby was a red six stripe, and the other one was a black and white, and that was the first one. And so I
Oh,
have
very
that's
cool.
kind of been my strategy because not like I can't go out and buy 20, 30 six stripe geckos
You
for
can't take it out of your trust
yeah.
fund?
Oh,
Yeah.
no, my wife says no.
No. I I speculate sometimes because there's some people that all of a sudden it started after me, right? I'm not that
Hmm.
veteran. I've only been around for about 2.5, 3 years max, right? And I see some people, and I'm like, all of a sudden, I'm looking at their collection. I'm like, holy cow! And you've got breeders that size. I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, man, you got to be having a fantastic time at work. But that's really cool that okay, you're saying that's not the mainstream. It's interesting you say that. I don't think it's the mainstream on social media. I agree with you there. But you talk to the big breeders, right? Every major breeder I've ever talked to, and at first I go, yeah, that's a sales technique. Buy the ugly sibling. Yes, it's less expensive, but now you get rid of this, you still get a pretty penny for it because of lineage, right? And so I was very skeptical. Plus, I'll be honest with you, I'm a little bit vain. I like pretty things, so I want to
Yeah.
spend the money on the really expensive ones, I because it keeps me interested. But I completely agree now. Really looking at things, just because you have two really nice looking geckos doesn't guarantee the babies are going to be fire. And I think lineage is really having its heyday right now. You hear it a lot on, my podcast, other people's, channels, looking to see what the genetic potential of whatever that family tree is makes a huge difference. And if you can save a few bucks and buy the second, third best gecko that it produced 10 geckos,
Right.
but you got the second best one and you got it at half the price. That's fantastic. And it might not have every phenotype that you're looking for, but if it can produce those phenotypes for you, you've just saved
Yeah.
potentially thousands
It's
of
true.
dollars.
And I was recently listening on the Gecko Pod to the interview with Andrew and Sarah Gilpin. I don't know if you've listened to that one
Yeah,
yet, but and
I've listened to every episode they've put out. Yep, they're doing a great job.
Andrew hit on this. He talked about how, you can have a super high end pair that produces babies, and one of them could come out really plain looking, one of them high expression, but genetically, the genetics are there, and he talks about
Yep.
that, and they kind of were. I kind of felt like the hosts were just kind of like, oh, okay, well, good luck with that, but but it's
Yeah.
true because
Again, I was skeptical.
because
It
that's
is.
what I've been doing and it's working. Of course, I've bought
Yep.
some good genetic lines and mixed them in, but what my actual focus is on creating my own lines by pulling from a lot of different places, and I have animals that are not from six stripe genetics, but I see like that base pattern of the super stripe, which we can talk about that, the six stripe versus super stripe. That's another thing we can talk about a little bit.
Yeah, we
Um,
definitely need to get back to
yeah,
that, but
so I
we'll
mean,
circle
I'm
back
looking
around.
for these traits and trying to pull them together, and just I have my main project. I have probably about 12 males I'm working with. Um, and right now I'm actually short on females because I think I got
Okay.
like 12 males and like 8 females. So
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, it's I agree. I One last point about just buying the babies that have a little less, expression but have that strong genetic. The very first person that I ever met at an expo that really I felt was an expert um, is a guy named Ariel with Aerotonics. Do you know him up in Chicago?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
super amazing guy. I mean, couldn't be nicer. Him, his whole crew. There's a lot of great people that work with him, and honestly, I can't say enough. So I can't wait to see him at Tinley. But with that, he was the one who initially gave me that idea. And again, I kind of thought he was just trying to sell me a gecko, but his geckos,
hmm
even the ones that he thought were not his highest end, were still such fire geckos. I'm like, sure, all right. If you say it's even better genetically, I'll take it because it's already
yeah,
a gorgeous gecko. So, yeah, if enough people who are intelligent tell you something, you might want to listen. So,
yeah.
speaking about, I want to
And
listen. Oh, go ahead.
Ariel Kudia, you better get on here. I heard that you asked him and he didn't come on.
No,
He
he's
needs.
going to be on here. So I think it's we just chatted. It'll be a lot of fun having him on. It's just timing. I've got some great guests lined up. I'm actually what's kind of fun is I got about 2 weeks worth of people lined up right now, and I think it's kind of cool. I think people are jumping on, having fun. So if you want to get on this, if you're watching this, you're in the Gargoyle game. You got something that you want to say on the show. I'll talk to anybody, But Ariel,
Yeah.
he'll be on here. So he's helped me out so much. I'm not worried about him. But yeah, I cool.
Uh,
I want to get back to stripes,
yes.
right? Six stripe versus super stripe. Honestly, this is a pet peeve of mine. Okay, and I'm going to ask probably a few more people that I have on the show for their explanation because I think we need to define the language we use in order to effectively communicate what we have. And we don't have a ton. It's not like it's all super ambiguous, in my opinion. Now, there's some gray area as far as percentage of blotch versus ultra, super blotch versus ultra blotch. I get that's kind of confusing a little bit. I love the video that Red Rack put out about that, giving his take on it. Not that he's the end all be all for telling us what it is, but I think we need to have the discussion of what defines it. So I would love to get your opinion. What's the difference between a six stripe or an ultra stripe?
It is super stripe.
Or a super stripe, or an ultra. I don't know. I'm using
Okay.
words we
Yeah,
don't
Ultra
understand.
stripe. Yeah. All right. Well, read a book.
There we go. Okay. Books. What are those?
Hey,
It's an ancient relic.
You seen this book?
I've seen it.
Yet?
I actually have it in my Amazon cart.
You gotta get it.
I gotta buy it.
A lot of the photos in here are by Andrew and Sarah Gilpin when they were helping photograph the collection for Alan Rapace. And
Okay.
There's a lot of good information in here. It's an older book, but so some of the information as far as care is outdated. But
Okay.
like this is like the original people like establishing what traits are and stuff. So in here they talk about the different the morphs, right? And so
Sure.
you have let's see.
Well, now I'm definitely buying this book.
You have your
I didn't know that was in there.
pattern morphs, right? Which
Yeah.
which is the base pattern, right? So you got your
Okay.
your banded, reticulated, striped, super striped. So it's all spelled out in here. The striped, super striped, ultra striped, and so
Okay. And is it so? That's a base
that's
pattern.
a base pattern. Striped, super striped, ultra
Got it.
striped. So you can have so they explain it here, but the photos here are not the best representation. If you want a visual representation,
Okay.
go to the Gargoyle Queen website. Have you gone
You're
through
gonna
there?
say that. Yep.
Yeah, she has it all.
Have
Yeah.
I gone
There's
through
a
her
few
website?
things there
Absolutely.
that I wish that there could be a little bit more of different examples, but hers I think was the best one I could find. But yeah, a super stripe would be where the pattern on the side goes along the side instead of being like zigzagged or whatever on the side or reticulated on the side. A super stripe is stripes going all the way across.
Mhm.
Ultra stripe, I believe, is where like it looks like
Okay.
almost like granite waves maybe, or narrow. A lot of narrow lines.
Yeah.
That's what
You
it
know what
says in the
I'll
book.
do?
A lot of narrow lines.
A lot of narrow lines.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's ultra stripe.
I think this is a great opportunity for me to do a sub video. I got to get this information, buy the book,
Yeah.
and make a full video on each one of these. I think that would be, if you like that idea, leave a comment down below. Let me know that you want to see that video. I'll make it for you guys. So very cool. And then, okay, so what's the six stripe?
Well, that's a color morph.
Okay.
So that's the color morph is the actual colored bright pigment, And
yeah.
So that's where you get like your black and white stripes, your orange blotch, red blotch, pastels, those different things. Well, there's
Yeah.
base color, and then there's the actual pattern. And a six
Right.
stripe would be, having six stripes on it. You count it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, there you go.
Yep. Until they're so nice that they
So
blend together, because
and
I've seen that
and
too.
I think a lot of times people are confused because they're coming from the crested gecko community, and
Mm-hmm.
so they're thinking, oh, super stripe crested gecko. And so when they look at the gargoyle, like, oh yeah, that's kind of like a super stripe crested gecko. So it's a super stripe. Well, yes, it
Yep.
actually is a super stripe because the pattern is all going that direction. But it's basically, I would say, as far as I've seen mostly, all
Yeah.
all six stripes are super stripe, but not all super stripes are six striped. Does that make sense?
Correct. Okay. It makes complete sense. And you just added another dimension to the way I think of gargoyle geckos now. So, when I was talking to Kelly and Paul, right? I I was talking to them at Tinley, and I think I've told this story before. They explained to me when I was looking at trying to recreate my red girl, who's a red base, red stripe
Hmm.
gargoyle gecko, super bright. And they said, you have to think of it as two separate things: the base color
Right.
and the pattern color. Both of them are separate genes, and you're expressing both of them together. And so those are two pieces of the puzzle, whether that be a blotch coloration being the pattern's color or the stripe coloration. To me, that's one thing. Then you've got the base color. And now you're adding in, if I'm hearing you correctly, the base pattern is another dynamic. So you can have the base pattern without having the base color that you want, or the actual pattern color. So there's three different dynamics that we're playing around with when
Yeah,
really
you have
thinking about
your
breeding
base
gargoyle
color,
geckos.
base pattern, and when you're talking about like the early breeders, that's mostly what they were working with. They mostly just had base color, base pattern, and it wasn't until as they breed them they get actual colored
Yeah.
pattern. So you have your it gets a little confusing because you're almost kind of like
Yeah.
using like variations of the same words to express what you're talking about, but there's different elements there.
Absolutely. Hopefully everybody understands what we're talking about. But yes, you've got the pattern that's just on the animal that doesn't change. You've got the base color that fires up and fires down. And you've got the pattern color that stays pretty much the same color no matter if the animal's fired up or fired down. And typically that's the colored blotching or the stripe. Now that can change a little bit based on age and whether they're breeding the color. But I think it stays relatively the same. That's what's cool about gargoyles versus crested geckos. A red striped gargoyle gecko is going to keep that color most of the time.
Yeah.
A red crested gecko fires up and fires down. It's all base color, and you get a pink gecko 90% of
But
the time, is
but
what I
even
hear.
then, there's
So
fluctuations in those colors. Like there's more than just fired up and
I agree.
fired down. I have some geckos, and one day I'll photograph them, and they'll look like a deep dark red, and then I'll photograph it another day, and it looks like more like a more neon color, a brighter color. And a lot of times
Hmm.
that can vary based on I think kind of like temperament kind of affecting it, like fired up and fired down, but also like how recently has it shed and what's the diet. I think, well, according to Alan Rapace,
Yep.
it's based on the what they eat can also affect their color. So,
Which makes sense. I mean, look at fish. Not that it's exactly the same. Again, I'm not a biologist, but with certain fish that I've kept, if I want to make the fish more red, you feed it more krill, you know? And so I don't know if certain fruits have a similar effect, or if bugs make them a little bit brighter. Um, Going back to my red girl Eve, when she was younger, she was kind of a darker, muddier, kind of
hmm.
maroon. And then all of a sudden I open the cage and holy cow, I'm talking fire engine red. Where did this
Right.
gecko come from? I'm like, this is amazing. I mean, red like this, okay? And, as she's bred, she's become more subdued. And I think that happens with a lot of female breeders with age. Um, but then all of a sudden she'd shed, and I put her back in with the male, who she's just with all the time. And I find it interesting. I don't know if it's a breeding thing, but she got brighter again. Right when I put her back in with the male, all of a sudden, I don't know if her libido went up and she got bright red.
But I
Who
mean,
knows?
you'll see these things, and sometimes, sometimes it's also
Yeah.
difficult because sometimes when like I'll come home and I'll see one that's just like glowing, but it's dark outside and it's not a good time to take a picture.
Yep.
And then by the time I get to go take a
Hmm.
picture, it's not the same.
Not the same. That's why I got my light box over here.
Yeah,
Rain or shine, if I want to take a picture, I have that thing whipped out so quickly.
I
So,
I tried with the light box, but it just I don't know, I had trouble with it. So
yeah, they're not perfect. They're
my
not perfect
my wife's
by
a
any means.
photographer, but she doesn't really help me
Oh,
with the
nice.
photos. So she did like early on before we had so many kids, and then now it's she's busy, and I get it.
Or so many
Yeah,
geckos.
yeah. I mean, we could you know spend an hour a day taking
You could
pictures.
spend months.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so right now I just the quick and easy. I use my phone, take them out, take a picture. That's all I'm doing now. So
Yeah. And phones are getting pretty decent. I mean, obviously the newer phones out there take fantastic photos, but still, I mean, maybe you can go on my page and pick out which one are my DSLR camera pictures and which one are my iPhone pictures. I think it's pretty obvious, but again, I took them. Okay, that's cool. I want to buy that book now. For all the people in the audience, I know you flashed it up. What is the book's name that we were referring to?
gargoyle geckos.
Gargoyle Geckos, and who wrote it?
Well, I might butcher this first name, Philip de
Oh, that's okay. I don't want to put you on the spot.
Lajali and Alan
Yeah.
Rapace. I mean, but
And
if you look
Alan
for
Rapace. All
gargoyle
right.
geckos and Alan Rapace and Frank Fast, I mean, I think if you go on Amazon and you type in gargoyle geckos, this is probably the only book you're going to get up there. There may be one or two out on
Yeah, I think
gargoyle
there's like
geckos.
only one or two, and
Yeah.
that's got a pretty distinct yellow gecko. Honestly, that's one of my goals. I don't have any geckos to actually make it, but that yellow base, you
Yes.
can find them pretty inexpensive every so often. But I would love, and I think I saw a picture. I wish I just took a, I wish I saved it earlier. Where I want to do a red blotch or a red stripe, but really a red blotch with that yellow, bright yellow
Yeah.
base. How sweet would that
Yeah,
look?
and that's something I've been working on too. So, uh,
All right. Well,
because
you'll probably beat
a
me
lot
to
of
it, but
my
if
a
you,
lot of my lines come from Sharon, and she has a lot of yellows. And Rojo, my first male I got from Kelly, which was produced by Sharon, he's yellow
hmm
base. So I've been mostly working with yellows
okay,
for 8 years now. So um,
that's awesome. Well, if you hatch one out, don't gouge me. All right, cut me a deal.
at
Remember
this
me.
point, it's more like it's not that real vibrant yellow. It is yellow, but it's a softer yellow.
Mustard. Yeah. So, okay, you've got these high-end geckos. You've got plenty of genetics to work with currently. Are you mostly in-house at this time, recycling genetics, just seeing who's related to who, pairing new babies together to keep your stuff going, or are you buying new stock, bringing it in, and where do you get it from? What are you looking for?
Uh, I haven't been buying anything much. I think the last gargoyle I bought was 2 years ago, maybe. I bought there was somebody.
Okay.
Um, I think she's pretty much sold off all of her geckos, and I got a male. I got it was a male and female adult. They were older, and they were not six stripes, but they had produced this six stripe male. Um, and you may, if you
hmm
go on my Facebook, you can look up Racknaroth, which is the name I came up with. Um,
Oh yeah,
yeah, so
I
Racknaroth,
like it.
he's from that pair that's not six stripe, and I bought the mom and dad and him, and he was a full adult like 3-year-old ready to breed male. Um, I think that's the most I've spent on a gargoyle was him, and it actually wasn't.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Is it worth
it
it?
wasn't an astronomical price tag, but it was. Yeah, I added him in there for bloodlines, and he's produced a handful of six-stripe babies already. Uh, but and then I also traded.
Nice.
I just remembered. So I did stripes. Everything was stripes from the beginning. I only bought striped animals. Besides that one blotch, which I never bred that one, and I didn't keep it that long. I just like switched to
Hmm.
stripes, and so I have Rojo, and I believe him to be a dominant striped male, meaning that if I even put him with blotches or reticulated, he only produces striped babies for me. So, and then, but
Okay.
yeah, so I never had, I had produced blotch babies from other males. I had she's light colored. I don't know if you call it yellow. It's like yellowish white with orange blotch female. She's here, and I
Yeah.
had
Kind of golden.
two other like low expression blotches, and I didn't have a male. Well, there was a guy local, and I traded him for a male. I have no lineage on it, but he's a decent blotch with a red. He's a red blotch with red base, and I put him in there with them, and they've been making blotch babies this year. This was my first year with the blotched group.
The blotches. All right. So, well, one thing I remember that I don't know if it was last year when you posted it, but I thought it was the coolest photo. You had your hand with 5 six-stripe babies on each finger. How long did it take you to get that photo?
All right,
I'm gonna put up. I'm gonna
let
find it
me
and put it up right
let
here.
me. I'll confess something here. So this will be.
Photoshop.
So like I said, my wife's a photographer, right? So I did have her help me with that.
Nice.
But so I was trying very hard, and we spent probably 30 minutes trying to position the geckos on my fingers and take pictures, and it just was not happening.
Yeah,
Well, I wanted them not just on my fingers. I wanted
I
I
could
wanted the
imagine.
stripes to show, and I wanted it, be real perfect. Well, she's really good at doing face
Yep.
swaps on photo shoots and stuff.
Okay.
So she's like, "Oh yeah, she just told me hold your hand perfectly still, and I place a gecko on there, get it perfectly still. She'd take a picture, I'd take it off, put another one on, position exactly how I wanted, and then that's how that each one of those geckos actually was on that finger, and it's not nothing's altered other
Yes.
than
Okay.
they're just all put together on my hand.
On one timeline. Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah,
All right. Well, I
yeah,
appreciate your honesty, but I don't care if it was altered. I figured some magic had to be happening. Even if it was just one gecko, you got 4 out of the 5. I would have been impressed.
yeah.
But like, honestly, it was just a cool photo. So I think it was great. It was a great idea. So
Well,
kudos to your wife. Shout out to her. That was fantastic.
well,
Um,
I'm sure you've seen like people will have like 5 lily whites or you know
mhm.
5 melanistic leachianis or 5 um, high-end chihuahuas with all the white on them. I see all
The
these
white. Yep.
5 finger baby photos, and I'm like, there's got to be a gargoyle 6 stripe. And this was, this 2022 was my first year producing that man enough 6 stripes that I could do that. So I did
Yep.
it. So
Congratulations, you nailed
thank
it.
you.
Fantastic, and yeah, I think it looked amazing.
That's
So again, I'm gonna put it up for a second time right here, just to show you exactly how cool that
yeah.
was.
That was like my first. That was like when I felt like okay, I've made it. Like I've gotten past my setbacks, and even if all my breeders die, I got enough here in my hand that I can
To start
start
over.
over. Because I had so much bad luck, and So yeah, you just got to keep going, you know, and
Yeah. Hey, I got to give you the persistence. I think you've got such a cool story, and people listening to this, hopefully you take away that they're not robots. They're not things that are just going to produce because you want them to. And I think that's where a lot of people who get into keeping new cows, right? Specifically, just like with ball pythons, they see some of the price tags, they see, the markets,
mhm,
especially when they're high like they were the last few years, and they're gonna make, oh, I can make a quick buck. I'm gonna make thousands and thousands of dollars. It's gonna go exactly as planned. And I'll be honest with you, even to myself, I mean, I had aspirations. I didn't do it
yeah,
for that reason. I bought one thinking I was just gonna get a cool pet because I had a tank that I didn't know what to do with. Right, that was the very beginning of what I was doing. And then you're like, oh, they're easy to breed. Yeah, let's just get a pair. I'll just
right,
have a nice enclosure that looks cool, and it'll just be two geckos. Well, that's not true. They're like potato chips. But my point is that basically people need to have realistic expectations that these are our animals. Things are going to go wrong, and you have to persist. You have to adapt and learn from your mistakes. And that's where the great breeders come from, is through adversity, through trial and error, doing the best you can and keep learning. And I think you're a great example of that. So hopefully people take
thank
that
you.
away
Yeah,
from this
there's a lot of
story.
tough times that go with it, and that's one thing that I've heard a lot of people.
Yeah.
I go to shows and I kind of will mosey over by a table and just stand there and listen to people talk and try to sell geckos. And they have no idea typically who I am. I just kind of like listen and I walk up and look at their stuff and they're like, oh yeah, this is a
Yeah.
gargoyle gecko. I'm like, oh, that's so cool. But sometimes I hear them saying things like, oh yeah, you could buy one of these and grow it out. It'll produce like 16 babies and you'll be making all this money. And I'm like, that's not how you want to be selling animals, You're exaggerating. Yeah, they're exaggerating the
It's a Ponzi
profitability of
scheme.
it, and
Yeah.
you got to remember you're not. Yeah, you're selling a pet. You're selling a living animal that has to be taken care of, and that's more important than money. Like that's just if you take good care of your pet, your animal, you work with it.
Yep.
Maybe money will eventually, maybe eventually you'll make a little bit of profit, but it's a lot of work and it's not easy. You got animals
Right.
that rely on you. I have 200 or 300 animals that rely on me, but I also have a family that relies on me, and I haven't been super active the last 3 years because
Hmm.
we had a lot of medical situations, and there have been times, my wife was in the hospital at one point for 4 months in a row, and I was driving to work, driving to the hospital, driving home, trying to take care
Oh,
of
I'm
the
so sorry
kids,
about that.
running on almost no sleep, but I would be, in the gecko room like a zombie taking care of the animals because you got to do it, you know.
Yeah, who else is going to do it? I mean,
Yeah,
even just like after this podcast, we're recording this later at night, right? When our kids are asleep. And I got to still take care of the geckos after this. I'm still got to go mist them, change out their food bowls, and, God forbid anything happens where you have health issues where people are in the hospital, and I'm glad that your wife's doing better. But, it's one of those things where, like I said, these are our animals that rely on us. No one else is going to do it. And so when you're selling these animals to people, uh, you know, be honest with them. Be honest what they have to do. Don't tell them that they're so easy that basically you can leave them in a corner and they're not cockroaches, right? And even
right,
cockroaches,
right.
a lot of us have tried to breed them. Even that, the people over sell
Oh
how
yeah,
easy they are, right?
yep,
I've had cockroaches die on me. Um, but okay, that kind of actually leads me to this. The market right now. It's a hot topic. I think a lot of people like talking about it. Where have you seen the evolution? You got in here at 2015, you said, right?
yeah, around then,
Around
yep,
that time. Okay. So, obviously the last 2 years were just nuts, maybe the last three. I got in here at the peak of, relief checks and, extra income. So, where have you seen the evolution
well, yeah.
previously, and where do you see it going?
So
What's your
like
prediction
like I said,
with your crystal ball?
yeah,
Gargoyle.
When I started out, I was planning on just breeding them, and I was like, how can I get these guys to pay for themselves? And I was planning on just wholesaling them to the guy at the pet store for like $50 a baby. That was my plan. Get a few of
Okay.
them,
Yeah. It's a plan.
keep the better ones. I want to work on growing a genetic line. I talked to a guy who bred flying gens, messenger pigeons, and talked to
Oh,
that kind
okay.
of like
It's unique.
like playing in my mind like, okay, I gotta like do selective breeding and build these genetics. So yeah, my original plan was I was just gonna breed them as like a project. I wanted to like work on genetic lines, and whatever I produced, pretty much I was gonna wholesale it all, and just hobby, But I produced some babies, and I started seeing people list them on Facebook on the groups, and they would sell super fast. I was like, hey, I'll just list one on like 250, bam, it sold. I was like, oh, okay. So
Better
I
than 50
started
bucks.
listing. Yeah,
Yeah.
started listing them on there, and I was like, why would I wholesale them if I can sell them on the Facebook group? And
Yeah.
that's pretty much how I sold. That's how we used to sell them, was on Facebook groups. And at that point, there wasn't a lot of breeders, and they would even low end stuff would sell super fast because there was a lot of people who were looking for pets. At that point, I could post up the most basic looking gargoyle for 150, and bam, it would sell instantly. And you don't see that much anymore because I think a lot of people, it was sold as like a get rich quick scheme, and
Yeah, like we were
it's
talking
not.
about.
It's a lot of work, and people got into it,
Yeah.
and then now there are a lot of people who are now there's a lot more even good people who are good breeders, and there has been an increase in supply, but it's and and as you talked about with the crested gecko market, that exploded and everything. The gargoyle gecko, there was, somewhat of a bubble of sorts, but not as exaggerated because
Not as
you don't
bad.
get 16 babies from a gargoyle gecko typically.
Mm-mm.
Typically you don't. Um, which
Yep.
I think you hit on that in another video I saw. I would say on average, eight eight is a eight babies in a season is actually pretty good. Um, yeah, I
Okay.
had
That's
one
good to know.
female that did the same as my lychee female, and that one female in a year and a half produced 16 babies. But then after that, she almost completely quit having babies. So it still averages down to 6 to 8, 6 to 8 a season.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
So,
about 8.
but then
Yeah. Okay.
yeah,
I think that's good for new
yeah.
breeders
Talking about the
to
market,
kind of think
we
about.
Facebook. It started getting like where there's a lot more people selling on Facebook, and then, but it was still pretty good. I had people messaging me all the time on Facebook, like, hey, on my Facebook page, hey, what do you have available? And I didn't have to advertise. I didn't have to
Hmm.
like, do a lot. They sold themselves. People sought me out and bought them. And then Facebook shut down the
Yeah.
selling and advertising on Facebook. And then, then we go into starting it with Morph Market. And when Morph Market first started, I got on there really early, and stuff would sell super fast on Morph Market. We would list stuff up, and this was coming from, things being super slow on Facebook, and you have to do like, just emojis with the airplane or something to indicate that it was for sale, but it was not really working. So when
Yep.
Morph Market came out, there wasn't a lot of people on there, but their buyers were going there, and stuff was selling. But then it's good that Morph Market's grown, but it also it's easy now for customers to find a lot of whatever they're looking for. Whereas before they would have to seek you out on Facebook. And so
Hmm.
now they just like, oh, Morph Market, oh look, there's one there, here's here, like all these options. And then it's I would say the last
Yeah.
a few years, 4 years now, maybe. It's been not as good as it ever was before. And then, but during
Mm-hmm.
COVID, it was there was a spike there, and um, eh, I sold all right through COVID. I wouldn't say it was extremely good because um, I had
Yeah.
like an off season that year also, the first year, and I also was kind of distracted because I had like 10 people that I know, some
Okay.
close and some not so close, that passed away with COVID. So then it went into family medical issues after that.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
But right now, currently, morph market is oversaturated
Yeah.
in a lot of things, and like I think sometimes, I'm like, okay, well, I got this gecko. Here's what I typically would sell it for. Like, well, I want to give people a good deal and let them be able to afford things. So I tend to price things cheap, and then it just sits there. And it's like, here's a really nice gecko that's at a really good price, and it's just sitting there. And like before, 6 ago, list anything, and the most plain thing for 150 and bam, it would sell. Now you can put something pretty decent for 100, 150 and it
Yeah.
won't sell. So,
And I think, I talked about this with Sam from Sostic Geckos. There's a perceived value, right? And then there's actual value. And with something subjective like a gecko, and with the market fluctuating, I think there's a lot of psychology that goes into this, right? Sometimes you want to go and you want to give someone a deal, right? Like if someone contacts you, they're a really nice person, maybe you know them a little bit. I find that people are more willing to negotiate with you when you're an actual person negotiating one on one. With things like Morph Market or any of the other ways of posting a gecko, you put it up there and they're like, "Well, I still want a deal. That's the base price. That's where we're starting here. I want it cheaper, right?"
right,
And it's like, "Well, no, I'm already cutting my price. This is the sale price." And sometimes if you price it higher, even the same gecko, maybe it sells faster because someone goes, "Oh man, yeah,
right,
no, I've
right,
been looking in that price range, and that's the best one in that price range, right?" And the gecko hasn't changed. It's just that even when I started looking, I had, let's say, $1,000 to spend. I didn't care what the $500 geckos were. I figure if it's worth $500, it's not worth me
right.
buying, right? I wanted to buy the one nice $1,000 gecko. Plug in whatever number you have. So there's a lot of psychology there. But yeah, okay. So that's an interesting thing. What about, like, speaking of people wanting a deal? Did you ever have any situations with customers where it was a little bit more challenging, or how do you deal with situations where people just want to basically get it for free? Because I know if I post one of my animals in my local, like the Chicagoland area market thing that's on, I won't say what platform, I I get so many lowballers. I get so many people who are like, well, I can get one for free. Just go into the. It's like, dude, okay, then fine, go ahead. Like, I'm not trying to, I don't care if you're like, I feel like they're trying to flip it. They're trying to get it for free and then sell it for more. But people are just cheap around me
Yeah.
sometimes. So, how do you deal with customers that frustrate
Well,
you?
I see like there's whole communities dedicated to complaining about customers in the reptile community, you know? And
Yeah.
in any type of thing you do, you're going to have difficult people. And but we got to remember, I
Absolutely.
mean, to me, the most important things are the animals and the people I work with. That's what's important to me. And to make to like especially like
Mm-hmm.
if you go to a show and then if you ever like sell like echo to a kid and their face is just glowing and then they message you like 8 months later and they're like, look at this thing and how it's grown, like that's the fulfillment, like that's sharing the
Mm-hmm.
hobby. That's what I'm all about, sharing the hobby. And but then of course you're gonna get
Oh, I
all
love it.
kinds of crazy people, on both ends of the spectrum. You have really amazing people, and then you'll have people who are total jerks. But you gotta remember to stay positive and
Mm-hmm.
be kind and respectful to people. And I think a lot of times, like sometimes every once in a while I
Yep.
complain to my friends, but I try not to a whole lot because, when it comes down to it, I'm not here for those people. I'm here for all the amazing people that are out there, and don't,
And there's more
yes,
of
yes.
those than the
And,
negative
and so
people,
like
don't you?
just the other
Don't
day,
you
I
think?
had someone message me and they said,
Yeah.
"What's the lowest price you would take for this gecko?" Well, on Morph Market now, you can just put like refuse to answer, and I just refuse to answer that one. I don't care. Like I
Oh,
don't take it personal. I'm
yeah.
just like, okay, whatever.
I didn't
Goodbye.
know that. That's
I'm not
cool.
wasting my time on you. But I've had
That's a good strategy.
a few instances over the years, stories. Uh, One of them is a time I got scammed. This was early on. I This was when we were selling on Facebook. I listed up
Ooh.
3 geckos, and the guy wanted a package deal, so it was $560 for 3 geckos shipped, and I shipped them up there to Chicago. And the
That's a
guy
deal.
messaged me, everything was fine. Yeah. Um, ended up
Darn Chicago people.
ended up he there was a dispute on the charges on the, and I was using Square, and
Mm-hmm.
so I got it notified me like, oh, you have this dispute. I have been using Square at shows and had run some money through their accounts, but then whenever things went bad with this guy and he disputed the charge, there was absolutely no communication from Square other than, sorry, your charges have been disputed. We're shutting down your account. We're taking your money. There's nothing you can do. You couldn't call them, nothing. So my money was gone and my geckos, and I was so stressed
Oh
about them
no.
because I have been trying to message the guy to like see how things are going, and he quit responding. And then I started seeing him post things online of like he was selling them up there on Craigslist and
Yeah.
stuff, like posting them up and trying to sell them. And then people were inquiring about them. He was using my photos too, and people would inquire, and then he would ask for them to send him money, and then he of course didn't deliver the gecko, and so he was scamming a whole bunch of people with my animals and my photos. So I started reaching out to people in the community, and I had talked to Marcos, he's been my friend
Yep.
for years now, and that's when he introduced me to Ariel Kudia.
Mm-hmm.
And Ariel Kudia and I'm not sure, I think it was one of his
Yeah.
business partners. Um, they messaged him through Craigslist or something and arranged
Mm-hmm.
pickup. And Ariel Kudia, drove there. His partner, I think it was a female. She met these guys as a bunch of young
Wow.
hoodlums,
Okay.
as the old people say, and we bought them back. I I can't remember how much. I think it was maybe like $200 or something. We bought them
You
back,
okay? You got them at a
but I
discount at
got
least.
them. I got them
Yeah.
back. I got them back, and that's what I mean. I was just happy that they were safe.
That's cool. I mean,
You know.
that's a cool story just in itself. Way to go, Ariel, to help you out too.
Well,
That's great.
and that just tells you about the community. Ariel
Yeah.
didn't know me,
Uh,
and he drove like I don't know how far, and takes risk to
yeah.
save
No,
these
things could go
animals.
wrong, or I mean, there's no violence in Chicago. Zero. No. So,
Yeah,
um, no, that's awesome. That's a really cool story. I'm glad the geckos were good or safe. That's a cool ending too. Because people who do that kind of stuff just suck and usually don't care about the animals, and unfortunately, it can be bad. But like you said, and we said earlier, for every idiot out there, if it's too good to be true, be
right.
cautious, right? Um, there's a million amazing people. I actually purchased two just phenomenal geckos. Okay, one's the male that I paired to my red girl. He's a six stripe, red stripe. Actually, and then he came with a great package deal with a six stripe female that produced my six stripe baby. That's from Northern Gecko line, and it was up in Canada. I messaged him saying that he was, looking to sell a few geckos, and he gave me a price, and I'm like, this is too good to be true. And then he sold me the female for like half the price that he sold me the male when I packaged them together. And I'm like, and it's free shipping from Canada. I looked at my wife. I'm like, I'm probably either going to get scammed or this is going to be the best transaction ever. Best transaction ever. Bell City Exotics, you rock. You're not a scammer. You're not too good to be true. You're amazing. So, sometimes it works out. But you gotta be willing to take the risk if it's too good to be true. But I'm glad
Yeah,
that
but
worked out.
in the business, you're gonna come across both, and when the bad things happen, I like
Yeah.
dealing with customers when those bad things happen, and when you have bad luck with animals' health or something, you just gotta roll with it and keep going,
Mm-hmm.
and
You do. We'll lead on each other. If you have a bad day, talk to a friend in the community. We'll all talk and commiserate together and celebrate together. As soon as I hatched out that baby, I messaged you. I messaged
yeah, yeah,
a bunch of people I talked to in the gecko community. I'm like, I hit the jackpot,
yeah,
right? And so that's the cool thing about this community. I mean, we've never met in person, right? We're thousands of miles away from each other, and yet I get to
right,
celebrate with you. My wife, who's sitting on the couch next to me, I'm like, I got a cool new gecko. She's like,
yeah.
whoop de doo.
Oh, yeah. Before this,
Right?
before this
Um,
podcast, I told my wife, I was like, "Oh yeah, we're doing a podcast. I need you to come on and
yeah,
tell about the geckos." And I was like, "Well, actually, she does a really good job at listening, but
yeah,
she'll say she doesn't care. She'll listen because she cares about me, but she doesn't really care about the geckos." So I
yes.
was like, "Oh, how many grams?" He's going to ask you this. How
Hmm.
many grams do you recommend before, breeding, like a male or female? And she's like, 3 is really good. 3 grams. I was like,
So she's funny
do
too.
you even know how much do you know how much a gram is? She's like, oh, 200 grams,
Uh,
200 grams. But
oh, that's awesome.
yeah,
Now we're
but
in
I was
Lychee
excited to
territory.
come on. Yeah, I was excited about coming on and talking because if you talk with people who understand the hobby and are interested in it, it makes me more motivated.
Yes. Yeah, it definitely drives people, and so that's a big reason why I'm jumping onto this. I've been feeding off other people who are brave enough to get online and even just post on Instagram, and so hopefully somebody can
Mhm.
take some inspiration from the two of us doing this. So one thing before I let you go for today, I've got a few last questions. I probably have more than that, but anyway, I one of the things that my male that I'm looking to potentially sell has the genetic potential for, and his eyes are starting to turn. We had mentioned, you've got some experience with phantom eyes or some insight. What do you think about phantom eyes? Do you think that's something to pay attention to? Do you like it? Do you use it? What's your experience with phantom eye?
So personally, like I have some geckos that have, dark eyes, and I like it. It's not something I
Hmm.
necessarily breed for. My question for you would be like, how do you know it has the genetic potential for the phantom eye, and how old is it that it's now starting to show that trait?
Great question. So I actually thought of this gecko when you were talking about that little kid who goes and buys a gecko at a show and then messages the person a few years later.
Hmm.
I'm that little kid. No, I'm not that little kid. I'm that big kid, right? I Nature Nut was the
Yeah.
one where he was my first male I ever bought, and I loved her display. It was one of the prettiest displays at Tinley that year, and she had a really bright Chihuahua hybrid, which was kind of controversial back then. Now I think it's a little more accepted. But anyway, long story short, she showed me she had a bunch of babies that she listed as either possible phantom or 100% chance of phantom, and mine was a full phantom potential. both parents had the phantom eyes. So the mother had deep, deep black eyes, like really amazing. I'll put a picture of the mom here because I have pictures of the parents. She gave them to me earlier. And then the dad also had a phantom eye, not nearly as dark, but you could see that it had turned kind of like a darker gray. So I feel like there
Right.
might be some variation in it. This male is now just turned about 3 years old, and his eyes are clearly darker than any of my other geckos, but they're not his mother's black eyes. They're more of like a dark, how would I put it? It's not like a gunmetal gray quite yet, but just a shade lighter.
Right.
So
Right.
I don't know if it's going to take longer for it to develop, but that's my experience with one gecko that might have that genetic.
So I don't know if I've ever actually gotten uh, phantom eyes that have the genetic background, and I haven't really tracked all that, but that is what people say is between it starts usually after 3 years and then darkens up to like 5 or 6 years. So it could be progressive. Sometimes it's fast. But what I would
Yep.
say is, I mean, you did the right thing in that if you're seeking out a phantom eye, and that making sure that the parents have that trait, because genetics are not the only way that you can get the dark eyes. A lot of dark eyes can be
Really?
caused from eye injuries. I don't know if you've heard that, but I have geckos that have super dark,
No.
almost completely black eyes that I grew them up for a long time. They never had dark eyes. They get their eye injured, turn super dark.
Interesting. And when you say eye injured, you're saying like in a fight with another gecko or like just
Yeah,
stuck it in a branch?
yeah. Or just a little piece of something, like a splinter or who knows, something gets in there.
Okay.
And I've
Brings
had
a whole new meaning to the term black eye. Yeah, I'm sorry,
yeah.
that's a bad joke. I'm a dad, guys. Everybody, lay off me.
uh,
Uh, so, yeah, no, that's really cool. I'd never heard that. So, how many geckos do you have that potentially have it for that reason that you've seen?
Probably 4 or 5.
That's a good sample size.
Yeah,
Very cool.
and
Now,
so
disclaimer: if you're listening to this, don't go poke your gecko in the eye and then try
yeah,
to pass it off as a
don't,
phantom eye.
don't.
All right.
But it is important that if you're searching for something and you're like, oh, there's an adult and it's got one eye is super dark. Typically, it's like if it's injury, a lot of times it's one eye,
It's one.
unless
Yeah.
something happened where it hurt both eyes. But also, a lot of times you'll see as they get a lot older, the iris does get somewhat darker, not to the extent of like
Hmm.
phantom, but as they get up in the teen years, they got a black pigment on their face and their eyes and stuff darken a little bit. But um, yeah, and this can kind of lead into our next section about the about YouTube and stuff. And
Yeah, yeah,
something
because we're,
I had some questions for you, and if other
yeah.
people have input, because I'm trying, like I always like started out, like when I started out, I was like, oh, I would like to do YouTube videos, but you know, David at Tiki Geckos, his videos are like so good, I'm never gonna catch up to him. So that's why never I never
You
started
can't
doing it.
compare yourself
And
to
then
others,
now I
man.
look back at his videos from way back then, and I'm
Yeah,
like, oh well, I probably could have done that.
he's
Yeah.
grown a lot.
So um,
Yep.
I read a book a few years ago uh, by David Acuff called Finish, and he says the
Okay.
I put it down here. The opposite of perfect is not imperfect, it's finished. So a lot of times it's our perfectionism that holds us back from doing something, and sometimes you just gotta do it and get it done and have it finished,
Yep.
and that perfection is gonna come with time. So for me, and to get the courage to, I was like I was trying to get up the courage to make a YouTube video, and my son's like, "Oh yeah, I'll do a YouTube video." So I just got him in there, and we started making videos.
That's awesome.
But um,
He's so
Yeah,
cute, by the
yeah.
way. Yeah, he does a great job.
And so we started doing the videos, and my son has worked with geckos since he was born, pretty much. I mean, at like he grew super fast, and at
Hmm
6 months old, I would roll his hand up like this and teach him to gently push the gecko like this, and yeah, and
Yep,
then
doing that with
eventually as
my
he got
boys.
older, we would have him sit, and usually I would have him like put his arms over and just let it crawl up here, and then you grab it before he on his face and let it crawl, and he became very comfortable. And so he's
Hmm
really good with the gecko. Sometimes, kids like one day they'll be okay with something, another day he might feel squeamish with something, but for the most part, he's really chill with them. We start making these videos.
Yep.
Well, I got a Saracenorum. It's right here. There's a male in there. I don't
Nice.
know.
You got
No,
all your
these
best
are
ones right
just
behind you, man.
random geckos. Yeah, but Saracenorum,
No, just the ones you're
he's
talking
here.
about. No, that works.
I got him from a tray with at the same time I got that blotch male,
Yeah.
and the so we just got him, and I had
Okay.
gotten him out and held him, and he was all right. So I put him in a small shoebox sized tub, and me and Andrew were like, oh, we're gonna make a video and we're gonna show this Saracenorum. So we start making the video. He gets the gecko out and he's holding it in his hand, and then it
hmm
jumps. Well, he knows how to pick up a gecko, and he picks it up, and then it jumps again, and he goes to pick it up again, and it drops its tail
Oh
while we're
no.
recording. But he didn't
Yep.
he did the exact same thing I would have done. Everything was fine, just geckos sometimes they do that. And but
They do.
I made a video, but I got so many, like 90% of the comments were negative and being like, "Oh, this is what happens when you let a
Mm.
kid hold a gecko." Blah 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 blah. I'm like, have no idea.
Oh.
This kid's been doing this for 7 years. But then,
Right. He's held more geckos than you
yeah,
have, sir.
oh yeah.
Okay.
So we had that happen, and then I had already recorded a video on eye injury. I believe it was eye injury, because we
hmm
had a gecko that had an eye injury, and I went through the treatment of it, and we hadn't posted it yet. And then when I got all those negative comments on that, I was like, do I really want to post a video with about treating an eye injury? Because like there are some minor eye injuries that you can treat. If I mean, I wouldn't say just anybody, but if
You know what you're
you're
doing.
keeping geckos all the time, you're comfortable with them, and there are minor things that you can do to attempt to fix it before you take it to the vet. And I was making this video, but then I never
Right.
posted it. And Andrew, even in one of our videos, he's talking. He's like, "Oh yeah, watch our video about the eye injury." Well, he doesn't
The
know.
eye injury.
We never posted it. And I was also gonna
That's
make
awesome.
another video, like several of those types of videos, like we were talking earlier about treating a tail, minor injuries.
Yeah.
Like what what do you think? Like, what's your opinion on that? Like, how do you just post it and just ignore all the negative comments and let it be helpful to a few, or um, what's your opinion?
I. So okay. I'm lucky so far in my experience, right? And I posted a few videos where I thought I'd get a little bit of, guff. I was in tongue in cheek saying that gargoyle geckos are not. I mean, I truly believe this are better pets than leopard geckos or better pets than bearded dragons for most people, not everybody. And I thought, okay, I even posted it to the leopard gecko and the
Bearded
bearded
dragon.
dragon forums on Facebook just to see if I could get bearded dragon. Thank you. And I didn't get any negative comments. I just got it deleted and rejected. So I guess that's the worst that happened so far. The only thing that I ever got negative so far, and you say you're just gonna, go and ignore it. I think that's the easy thing to do. However, it still makes me think about it. I read all the comments. So if you leave a comment here telling me that think I'm the ugliest person in the world, I'll read it. I'll disagree with you. But I did a whole thing where I was showing these enclosures down here initially with one of my very first videos, and somebody posted. He was kind of nice. It was a backhanded compliment. Gorgeous geckos. Shit enclosures. You got to do this, 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 and this better. I'm like, okay, cool. I mean, do I want better enclosures eventually? Absolutely. Are they everything the gecko needs where they're thriving and breeding and doing everything they need? Is it appropriately sized? Absolutely. Otherwise I wouldn't show it
Right.
online. But I listened to it, and I can't lie that I thought about it probably more than I should have. Um, but I think that's just human nature. When it comes to controversial stuff, you've got to weigh the pros and cons because people are going to be very opinionated, and it's easy to post things online, and you don't know who's actually saying it. Is this someone who knows what they're talking about? Well, okay, then I'm gonna maybe think about it. If Paul from Rack House says, hey, your enclosures are absolute junk, you're doing this all wrong, you're hurting your animals, I'm gonna pay attention. But if Joe Schmo from YouTube says, yeah, I'm an idiot and I'm doing everything wrong. Well, okay, I'll take that as a constructive criticism. Look at what I'm doing, and if I disagree, I just kind of shrug it off. Where I think it's hard in your situation, to be honest with you, is when it's your kid. Um, Anytime, and that's one reason why I haven't brought my kids on this podcast yet. When they're a little bit older, like your son's age, I think that there's an appropriate time where you think they're ready to go on there and they know what they're doing. I think it's a cool thing. I would love to do that with my kids one day. So I'm, I don't think it's a bad thing. But I also know, kind of like you're in a
Hmm.
situation, if someone attacks me, I can handle it. Someone goes and says something about my kid, them there are fighting words, okay? And so, I'll be a little bit more sensitive to that. So that's a decision you've got to make. Um, Plus, also the old saying is never in show business work with kids
Yeah.
or animals. You're doing both.
Well,
So you know,
yeah.
you're setting yourself up for a challenging shoot. How many videos have I done where I have a gecko on my
Right.
shoulder or my head, and I can get them to stay if I know which gecko I'm doing. Most of them are pretty chill. Um, but they're animals. All of a sudden one day it's gonna poop on my forehead and I'm gonna catch it on camera. It's bound to happen. Speaking of David
Yeah.
from Tiki's, how many videos have you seen of him playing with his animals? And it's a poop montage, so things are going to go wrong. A tail's going to get dropped, unfortunately. Not that you want that to happen, but unless it's a teachable moment for your son, hey, you grabbed him too hard, and that's something you can
Yeah.
decide. You don't need the internet to do it, but hopefully that answers your question. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. And also I would love to have input from the audience that watches this video, Like would you like to see, those types of videos that are addressing
Yeah.
medical type of issues, minor medical issues?
Well, I think that's good with the disclaimer. Just like there's a lot of medical
Right.
videos out there for acid reflux or, oh, you've got a little bit of a heart pain, right? Could it be a heart attack? Absolutely. Put the disclaimer, not a doctor, not a
Yeah,
vet.
sure.
Um, but okay, let's say I'm in a pinch. Okay. There's a YouTube channel that, I mean, it's blown up from what I could see. Leafy Street, I think it's called, right? Really amazing editing, amazing shorts, great storytelling. If you want to see, I would love to kind of emulate his storytelling, but I'm just not that good at it. I've tried. Where I think his number one, and it's not his number one video, but one of his most popular videos is his male died, his male gargoyle gecko. Did you see that one?
I don't know.
Where it's hemipenes. Anyway, I'll send it to you later. It's really cool. But it's about a medical thing. The gargoyle bred, its hemipenes got stuck out, and he shows how to go and put a solution on the hemipenes to try to encourage the gecko to lick it back in. And then he soaks it and he tries everything he can, which is what your videos would be before taking it to the vet. And as long as you kind of say, do these things. If you're not seeing
Right.
progress, take it to a vet. I think that's more than responsible. And I think it's great content for general keepers, because if we're not willing to talk about the tips and tricks to avoid spending thousands of dollars on vet bills while we're also doing the best for our animals, then we're going to be missing out on crucial information and not growing as a community. I say more information is better. It's your job as a consumer to weed out the junk and to listen to multiple opinions. And if people can't handle different opinions, then we're going to be, unfortunately, in this place we are right now with our politics. But I won't get into that. But yeah.
Well,
So I say
I'll,
post it. That's my vote. But yeah, if you think that I'm wrong, if you think that we shouldn't post, put it in the comments here. Let me know, and I'll relay the information. Okay. But if you do think that we should post it, please put that in the comments. Let us know. We want to see that video on how to take care of a damaged eye, because I think it may happen. The more geckos you buy,
and
you're right.
I just had a friend who messaged me the other day, and he was talking to me about this eye injury, and I was busy and not really thinking. And then he's like, "Oh, I'm just gonna," like, I didn't tell him what to do, and he took it to and then the vet's like, "Oh, here, do this." I'm like, "Oh, that's what I always do." Like, I didn't want to tell him like do this because I was worried that, like, if he did what I said and then something happened with the eye, and then, like, well, I told him to do that, but then when he went to the vet, they said do the same thing I was going to tell him to do. So there are those early early simple things that you can do before it gets so bad that it needs surgery or whatever. Just like us, every time we scrape our arm, we don't run into the hospital, you know. We put a Band-Aid on it or something and clean it.
Yeah. Hopefully not. You know, insurance premiums are pretty bad, so maybe the people are. Yeah, no, I think I would love to see you post it. So, and I love, you know, your videos are very genuine. I think that's one thing that I've gotten watching you and your son, is that you can clearly tell that you care for the animals. You're very knowledgeable, and I would love to see more content come from you. So keep it up, man. Yeah. Well, hey, you know what? We've been going for quite a while. I think this is my longest podcast by far.
Oh,
yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. So nothing wrong with that whatsoever. David, you've been a fantastic guest. Thank you so much for coming on. Did you have fun?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we probably have even more to talk about. So let's schedule another time to have you come back on after we cycle through some of these other people coming on. And let's do this. Before we leave, where can people find you if they want to reach out to either inquire about your geckos or just want to get more information?
So I used
where
to only
can people
do
reach you?
Facebook pretty much, and I avoided Instagram for the longest time. But I recently linked it to where my Instagram posts to Facebook, but I don't really. I only go on Instagram to post photos so that they post to my Facebook. So you can find me the Gargoyle Den on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. I started the YouTube channel, and then our listings. Oh, we also have a website, thegargoyleden.com. It's not necessarily 100% up to date, but from there's also a link to the Morph Market. So then the Morph Market is where I have all my listings right now. But I sell a lot private messaging. Like, I prefer that over listing things. But so if you're like looking,
that could be a whole other major conversation. But yeah, so reach out to David. Okay, you know, slide into his DMs, ask him about his geckos, and you won't be disappointed. He's got some amazing stuff. You're doing great work, man. I'm so happy that you decided to come on this show. And you have a wonderful rest of your night. Hey, if you've enjoyed this video and want to encourage me to make more Gargoyle Gecko content, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, share this with a friend, and maybe check out one of the videos right over there. I'll see you next time on Gecko Cove.